Hi, this is Roger, thanks for dropping by. This is hopefully a short video, but you know me. It looks like it's going to be a nice day today, after all that lovely rain we had in a very short amount of time. It happens. That's outside sorted, I don't need to worry about outside today, so I can concentrate on inside. And if it's going to be a sunny day, you know, it's going to warm up in here, the foggers need topping up. You know, I've got a little bit of maintenance to do. Easy going. Quite honestly, everything out here that needs water has got it. And I need to visit the mounts and just have a quick look round there. I got a feeling that because we did get some sun yesterday, not a lot, but we got enough to warm it up in here. You know, I need to check the mounts, make sure they're not drying out and things like that. And this time of year, if they're not quite dried out, they can still get watered again, because if it's going to be warm in here today and they're almost dry now, early in the day, well, they will be dry by lunchtime. So, you know, it's the growing season still, just. The day lengths are shortening at quite a dramatic rate, and it's actually in the UK, we've got two periods of best growth, and quite honestly it's spring and autumn, and it's quite easy to see why. Most of the orchids we grow come from tropical areas where the day lengths sort of hang around between 11 and 13 hours all year round. Basically they don't move much away from that, so that's their comfort zone. And because most of our orchids come from areas like that, that's where they feel most comfortable, so that's when they're going to do their thing, you know. So you often find that quite a few of the tropical orchids in the UK slow up in the summertime. Just the light is so, well, intense for the UK, but it goes on for so long, you know. I mean, there's a point where they sort of think, you know, this is not my comfort zone, you know, I should be closing down. Nighttime is actually important for orchids. They need dark. You know, the way the plant's metabolism works, you know, going back to this respiration and transpiration stuff, that period of dark is quite important. And when it shortens down to a ridiculous amount, that things that happen at night time haven't got enough time to happen. And then, you know, this is a consequence. So quite a few plants actually slow up through the summer. They don't stop, because, you know, any light's better than no light. I mean, you know, come the winter time in the UK, you know, you get a dull day and the amount of light your orchids are going to get without artificially boosting it is quite low. They get a lot more dark than they do light. So what do? Slow up. And some even stop. You know, so you have to make seasonal adjustments depending on where you live. You know, if you live in a place that is more tropical, then probably your main worry is heat. You know, I don't tend to worry too much about that. We have had a few spells this year when it's been exceptionally warm for the country. You know, I mean, my extractor fan takes the hot air out, and the inlet fan brings in cooler air and keeps my temperature nice and comfortable out here. But when the outside temperature is at 30 degrees, what am I sucking in? Well, I'm sucking in air that's probably still too warm, you know, and the only thing you can do when the heat is up is try and keep your humidity as high as possible. If you can do that, they'll suffer the heat. They'll be okay. But, you know, really hot dry air is not what orchids grow in the main. That's not their comfort zone, so you have to do your best. Really the point, it's early in the day, I haven't really started out here yet, but it's a warning shot. It's just basically don't blindly follow. Do a bit of your own work, you know, do some research and have a think about, you know, if you Google a subject, you know, like nutrient deficiencies, types of nitrogen, there's all sorts of things you can research to do with your plants, you know, have a direct relationship, and you'll come up with a wealth of stuff. And in amongst that stuff you will get contradictions, trust me. I've been doing it long enough to know that, you know, the information you get won't all agree. There'll be differences. And all you've got to do is just sort of stand back and weigh up what those differences are. Are they minor? Well, in which case you can probably ignore them. But you have to bear in mind, if 10 people say one thing and one person says something quite different, that one person might be right. How the hell you're supposed to find that out, I really don't know. But, you know, when you get information, you know, direct from top class universities with some of the top scientists around and things like that, and it's recent information, I'd say that was pretty good stuff. You know, big companies, massive growing environments, all sorts of things like that, have been doing it for ages. That's probably quite good stuff, you know. And the way we grow our orchids is, quite honestly, quite different to most plants. But when you move over and start thinking about a hydroponic methodology, then our orchids do, in the main, fall into that category. So you need to qualify any Google searches and things. You know, and if you start looking into hydroponics, you will come up with a lot of information. And when the majority of that information says one thing, and it's coming from some pretty high sources, it's probably right. What guarantee have you got? Absolutely none. So you still got to make your own mind up. But some things going on in the background, and you know, other people doing a lot of work and spending a lot of time are coming up with things that are not quite as read, you know, and you do have to make your mind up. But as a consequence of spending a lot of hours now looking into some things that are the topic of conversation at the moment, I'm moving back a bit. I'm not quite taking the path I thought I was. And with a few minor things that I will take on board, at the end of the day, I don't think I've ever been far off. If I was a long way off, what would all my plants look like? So I can't be far off, can I? You know, I get dendrobiums bursting out of the seams here. You know, I've got cattleyas putting on good growths. You know, I've even got a Masdevallia that seems to be growing reasonably well, which I am pleased, because it shouldn't be. You know, so in the main, stuff's doing okay. Well, when stuff's doing okay, yes, you have to question, could it do any better? And are there times of year when things ought to be a bit different? But, yeah, don't take everything as read. Perhaps do a bit of work yourself and see what you come up with. And if you come up with a huge sway of information that says one thing, you know, and a small amount of information that says something different, you need to make a choice. Which path are you going to take? And with me, I tend to go on the average and stay away from extremes. Often those extremes have got very little backup. You know, I like backup. I like work done over a long period of time, you know. And quite honestly, there isn't a lot of that around when it's specific to orchids, but you find what you can, you get the information you can, and apply it accordingly. But yeah, it's just a warning shot. Don't follow a long, thin, narrow path and exclude the wider view. Always look at the wider view. Think how many people on YouTube are growing orchids and have been for a very long time, winning prizes at shows, although that's not my goal. I do get a couple, but that's more coincidence than plan. You know, if I've got a plant that happens to be blooming incredibly well and there's a show coming up, I'll stick it in. And, you know, sometimes I've won a first in a show simply because nobody else put anything in that category. Well, that's not exactly saying it's the best plant around, it's just saying it was the only one at the time. You know, so again, you have to sort of think things through. But, yeah, don't choose a set path and follow it blindly, you know. Always have that wider view, always have that open mind, and Honestly, the work I've just done has opened my mind a little bit wider than it was, because I have become a little channeled of late. Well, I'm widening my view again. I'm not going to go into details. You know, this is YouTube, we're a community, we're a family, and I would never say anything that would deliberately target any individual and perhaps upset them. You know, some people are more easily upset than others. You know, some people are more fragile in their minds and everything like that. So I don't do that sort of thing. But I do pass on my views, hopefully in a plain, ordinary way that people can take on board. So look at the wider view, you know. Don't get channeled. Don't get a narrow focus. You know, I mean, how many different orchid types are in here? I can't possibly try and treat each type of orchid separately. You know, watering would take all flipping day. You know, and I can't be doing with it because it's a hobby. You know, I'm not earning me living out of it. I'm not writing scientific papers based on experiments and stuff like that. So I have to generalise, and I don't want to deviate anywhere near as much as I thought I might need to from the path I have always taken, that in the main has always worked. All I need to do is look at where it's not working and try and work out why. And when it is working, just leave it be. It's okay. It's doing okay. Do I need to mess about? And in the main, the answer is simply no. So I'm, you know, widening my path, heading back nearer to where I was before. And that will involve a bit less messing around, perhaps. Well, actually, it will. But as I said, you know, there's information available around at the moment that can be contradictory to other information, and you have to look at, well, if that other information is wrong, then, you know, this information is better. You could just say it's different. Yeah, there are loads of ways to grow orchids. Loads, not one. Loads. And somebody who says this is the only way you can grow orchids, I would suggest you go and listen to somebody else. Yeah? There are many ways. I mean, I know people that will adamantly say you cannot grow orchids in water. That's not how they grow. Well, I now know they are fundamentally wrong. Buried in old school, head in the sand, will not accept change. And quite honestly, I walk away. Unless they're a specialist. And, you know, I know quite a few of those who in the main grow one type of orchid, grow them well, they even hybridise and breed, and they've got awards for some of their results and stuff. Well, if they're that good at that type of orchid and I want some information about that type of orchid, get out of my way, I'm coming through. But generally I don't need that sort of precise information about an orchid type. You can get an awful lot of information that averages out, you know, and you sort of think, well, if that's how most people are growing them and they're doing okay, it's probably okay for me. So do your own research. Don't get channeled. And that's it. And as I say, I'm not going into any details, but there is a standing back sometimes where you sort of think, you know, you could be making dramatic changes to the way you're working with your orchids, and you need to know that that's right, and you're not going to start doing damage. You know, it's quite easy for an orchid to go downhill if it's not happy. You start chopping and changing stuff. Are you going to react fast enough to realise some of the changes you may have made are not working? Is the damage already done? So let's be careful out there. And I am going to have a nice day in here today because the sun's out and it's going to warm up, And I haven't got much work to do out here, but I'm still going to be out here. Yeah? Step back and smell the coffee. And enjoy the orchids. Don't get bogged down. Some worrying trends amongst people out there that are, you know, thinking everything's wrong with what they've been doing for the last 5 years, when it probably isn't, you know. And if you're new, well, you choose. You go with the flow. You go with the experienced people. You go with the people who've got more knowledge than perhaps you have. You go with people that are coming up with new ideas, new ways to grow. You make your choices. There's a saying, you know, you made your bed, now lie in it. But just make sure it's a comfy bed, not a bed of rocks, not a bed of nails. Don't stray too far away from your comfort zone, whatever that is. And even if it's not perfect, does it need to be? Yeah, it's just an open question, you know. Are my plants growing okay? Have they got reasonable root systems? Do they bloom? Well, that's a separate question. I mean, I've got some plants in here that have never bloomed. I know why. And if I like that plant just for its sake, just for the plant, then it gets to stay. Otherwise, you know, it's one that I'll move on. And there is going to be some movement out here. I want more space around my plants prior to this winter coming up, so I need to shift some. And what I'm looking to move on is large plants taking up a lot of room where the blooms don't float my boat. So that's quite a simple choice. I know which ones they are, I know where they are, I know the sort of space they're taking up. So, you know, there's some things to go. You're probably not going to like it, but that big white Vanda may not be long for this world. The bloom spike's gone now, and as a consequence of the bloom spike being taken off, the Vanda's now had its hook changed, and it's up near the roof again, where it should be. Well, it hasn't been up there for some time because of the spike, you know, which was 18 inches above the top of the plant. So the plant had to drop down 18 inches, which meant all these roots here are sat on top of the flipping fogger. You know, it did. So that one is a nuisance, so it might have to go. If you look at the large blue one, the plant itself isn't huge. So I'm just cutting through the jungle here. But the spike arches away from the plant. It doesn't grow bolt upright up above the plant. And those blooms are smashing. I would not want to be without that plant. And whatever it does in the future, because it's going to carry on growing, it will get taller and taller. And as it gets taller, the basket will have to drop down. It'll take up more vertical space that I've got, providing the blooms don't stick bolt upright out the top of the plant, which the white one does. So we'll see. That's not a decision made yet, but it's in the decision-making process. But yeah, I need to shift some out. So I'm going to get on with that thought process today while I'm looking round. And there's a few things need some attention. I had a busy day in the kitchen yesterday, messing about with things. And there's still a few things out here that need attention. They're not right. They could be better. So I may have a go out in the kitchen and deal with a couple of those, you know. But it isn't a work day. It's a just have a think day. And I need to look at some plants that are not doing as well as perhaps they should be and find out whether it's the environment they're in which case there's probably not a lot I can do about it. Is it the light level they're getting, in which case they can possibly be moved, if there's somewhere they can be moved to. You know, and just have a little think about placement. Placement's quite important when you've got a lot of variables. Yes, this is one single grow room, but light levels are different, quite different in places in here. And as the day lengths are dropping down, perhaps some things need to get a bit closer to the glass to increase the intensity of their light. Perhaps they're just a bit too far away. So I might do a bit of shuffling around today and a bit of thinking along those lines. but not a major work day, just a thinking day. And all the time while I'm out here, I'm thinking about how I look after these plants. Can I change something that I know will be an improvement? Things like light levels, easy, you know, frequency of watering. I've probably got that right in the main, otherwise stuff would be wilting all over the place or rotting its roots if you head the other way. It's a lovely little saying that you can hear it. I've heard it many, many times. You can't overwater an orchid, but you can water it far too often. Now you think about the difference. You've seen the way I water a plant. I absolutely drown it this time of year until it can't possibly get any more water in the pot. And then I wait for it to dry, and this time of year that happens quite quick. Do you think I'm going to pour that amount of water on a plant in the middle of the winter? Well, if you think the answer is yes, you need to think again, because there's no way my plants get that amount of water come, you know, late autumn into winter. The amount of water they get at watering gets greatly reduced, as does their feed and the frequency of their feed, because they're going to slow right down, whether I like it or not. There's nothing I can do about it. So I adjust how I work with my orchids with the seasons. These are thoughts that, you know, people need to think about. When you've got a load of sun coming in your windows through the summer and you've moved your plants back a bit so that you don't get them singed, well, there comes a time of year in the UK where you need to rethink that and think, well, actually the sun's not coming in that window as much or for as long. Perhaps the plants ought to move a bit closer. And then as you get into the winter and the really short days, quite honestly, they need as much light as you can get them. And the sun is so weak in the UK at that time of year. Plants that should never get direct sun will take a bit. When it's of low intensity, you know, the test is, if your plant's been in the sun for a bit, feel the leaves. If they are quite warm to the touch, that's the test. That probably means they're getting a bit too much. Now, there are ways of dealing with that. The higher the humidity, the less effect down that road, you know, so that's good. It's a way of relatively simply dealing with it, you know. But keep your eye on your orchids, and you know, seasonal changes are upon us, whether we like it or not. This particular seasonal change I'm not so keen on, you know, because there's certain things bursting with life and growing at a rate of knots that are going to start to slow up within the next, well, at the end of September basically. You know, it's the 1st of September today, and by the time we get to the end of September there will be signs of slowing up. By the time we get to the end of October there'll be a lot of signs of slowing up, and I've got to make some serious adjustments at that time of year. Not yet. Keep everything growing now while I can. And they've always grown, they've always done okay, and in the main they've always bloomed. So it seems a bit silly to chop and change stuff, especially when you're heading into dark territory, you know. So watch what you're up to, enjoy your orchids, don't get bogged down.